right. Well, it is 11 o'clock. So, Rick, let's get started. Good morning, everyone. How are you? Happy Monday. Is it a Mojo Monday, Rick, or is it just a regular manic Monday?
It's a manic Monday. It's always mojo, but at the end of the day, I think we're running a repeat this week because Brett was out of town, so we weren't able to shoot it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to have both Rick Hale and Mark Jones on. So, if we can park Mark, you can come off of mute. Good morning.
Good
Mike.
morning. How are y'all?
Doing awesome, doing awesome. All right, Rick, are you sharing your screen or are you leading it in terms of sharing? We want to start off with some stats
Yep,
today. And I thought we start off with possibly Fulton County, if we have that up.
I
Well,
believe
you
it's
tell me,
up.
you know what? You've got Metro Atlanta. So let's maybe just kind of run through the last 7 days. Also, we just want to wish Brett safe travels. So you're stuck with the three of us today. Brett, Brett's trying to travel back from out of the country. So safe travels to him. All right,
Absolutely.
Rick. So let's maybe talk about what we're seeing in the month of June, June 10th. Looking at the end of the week under actives, over 1,000 actives. What do you all think about that? I think the highest that we saw that was May 6th, going back in May 6th, but we've been down a couple of weeks. But I think that that's excellent news to see what's actively on the market. Will we say it's because we're in peak season, or are we just working that much harder, or just a little bit of both?
I think
Well, the
it's the
argument would be that the pendings look like they're holding ground. So if pendings are holding ground and the relationship between pendings, actives, and closed is close, and in this case, Fulton County closed a lot of business. Now, some of it might be rollover that finally made the system, but if you average it against looks like June 3rd, it's in alignment. It's actually still up comparatively. What do you think,
yeah.
Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of this is, the folks who are now their kids are out of school and they're ready to list the home and get it on the market. Like we usually see a little spike there, and I think that's what we're seeing.
Awesome. So that's Fulton County.
Let's go to
What are we
DeKalb.
looking DeKalb? What's DeKalb looking like?
Not
So
quite as dramatic on the active increase side, but still elevated.
Still up, yeah.
yeah. The good news is I'm just looking back, further in the year, and I don't really see a time that we were at 608. Last week was the week before that was close at 562, but probably before that was May 6th in terms of just actives going up. But looking at your relationship, Rick, with the 232 close to the pending of 189, what would your thoughts be there?
I mean, it's kind of holding ground. They increased slightly, so 40 give or take, and you can see pendings are up, 10. So there's a 25% relationship there. And closed is dramatic. 232 is a good number if you look across the board.
Hmm.
There's one other 256. So to me, it's just consistency. A little more active inventory. I think, some of the national news we'll see later reflects, a bigger disproportionate percentage. But again, real estate's a local business, and we're still talking about DeKalb, which is a massive county. But as a collective, I'd say if you're getting your unfair share, you were last month, you're probably in the same position this month, and not much has changed statistically.
Yep.
The question to ask on all these is like, what percentage are you getting, right? As an agent, are you getting a piece of that? Because plenty of real estate is closing. So regardless of the market being up or down, there's always opportunity.
You
Yep.
got that right. So here's Cobb County, Toya.
Yeah, so 580 active on the market, 205 pending with 293 closed. I think we're still seeing that level of consistency with uptick in the market. So it would be the real question is in your local area, where are you gaining your fair share? Because we're actually seeing that. I don't see anything that dramatically stands out. I think that looking back in May 6th really was a hot week. Because I keep going back to that number in every county, it's reflective that that's a higher month as well, but nothing close to what we had last month.
Closed is impressive. I will say Cobb County at 293. I mean, that's almost fit, well, greater than 50%
50%.
of the active inventory.
Mhm.
And it's a pretty significant jump when you look, you know, across the board at what's been happening over the last couple of months.
Yep.
So that's positive news.
Yeah. Can we ask that we look at Clayton and Fayette or Henry? I just want to do a South Side tour since I'm a South Side girl.
There you go. There's Clayton for you. Let me move the dial though. I got to slide this slider.
All right, cool beans.
There we go.
All right, so what was that? 124 active in Clayton County. The reason I bring these counties up is because we're still looking at affordability, and I just wanted to see what the relationship was in terms of what was pending. Pending and closed are down relative to what they're actively selling, maybe a little bit more. But yeah, it's still at 124. I think the highest we had or we've seen has been back in April 1st at 139. And then again, May 13th. But was just curious as to what our South Side looked like just a little bit. Henry County is another one that I would probably click on, Rick.
By the way, those ratios look very similar, even though the volume, it's a, you know, there's a certainly maybe bigger counties, more robust opportunity, but 124 and 60 close. So again, it's about 50% of the active figure that actually closed. So it's in alignment with the others. What'd you say, Fayette?
Yes, you can click on Fayette or Henry. I was just curious as to where those markets landed. Sorry to have you scroll all the way.
No, you're good. Easy. This is good practice.
Yes.
This is my best Brett Caldwell impersonation.
I know. So 43 active in Fayette County. For those of you, that is just a little further south than South Fulton. And it is pending. We had 13. So of course, a little smaller footprint, but still you're seeing about that same almost 50-50 ratio in terms of closed units. I was just curious as to what activities we have in those particular markets as well, because again, talking about affordability, and I know that that was one of the market stats that we talked about in previous months. Anybody would add anything to those?
I just think it's interesting how tight the inventory is in the South counties. Like, there's just not a lot of choice.
There's not. Well, and the other thing is, if that's your, you know, this reminds me a little bit of 2008, 9, 10, when, you know, I was teaching shift nonstop, and it was all about what do you have to do different that wins today that didn't win yesterday, because that whole definition of insanity comes to mind, doing the same thing, expecting a better or different result. And if you just peer down the barrel of active and closed, I mean, if you focus and that's your exclusive county, that could be problematic, but that's another conversation. Even inside your micro market, there's pockets that are hotter than others. And, you know, I remember saying this, that if your pond, the pond you're fishing isn't catching fish, or you're not, you know, bringing in enough income, pick up your rowboat and drag it to another pond. Like, start experimenting with concentric circles and get kind of become comfortable being uncomfortable in new areas. Study the data, especially again, if there's an active inventory number that suits or favors your outcome, then, you know, it's difficult.
Yeah, and if you have an opportunity inside of your market center to do an open house in a different area than you normally do it in, it's probably a good time to start looking at that.
Absolutely. Especially again, if you're not feeding yourself at the level you want, then you've got to make changes. And that could mean, again, testing new areas. It could also be inside of our industry, different types of real estate, whether it's land development, commercial. I mean, there could be some other element that opportunity lives in that you may have to learn new skills and move your focus.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that, I'm sorry, Mark.
Oh, I was just going to say, maybe.
Go ahead. You're good. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, maybe start doing tours of a new construction in different areas and showing that, because a lot of that inventory doesn't show up in these numbers. And there's a lot of availability there, and they have a lot of incentives for buyers. So it might be a more affordable way to get into things. So probably a higher likelihood of selling in some of these markets.
And the only other thing, and thank you for adding that, Mark, the only additional thing that I would add is consider on the South Side, most of the brokerages there use Georgia MLS. We're looking at FMLS data. So there is a lot of property, particularly in Stockbridge and in Henry County and Clayton County. They are Georgia MLS all day long. So Georgia MLS has this nice little thing called hot sheets that you can actually look at. So this is really not indicative of all of the market.
Yeah.
it does tell the story that there's opportunity there as well.
Toya, thanks for bringing that up. That is a little, I didn't think about that, but I bet that number is much bigger.
Right. Yep.
Same thing with Floyd. Very little, in the northwest corridor actually lands in FMLS relative to the overall inventory. So
Right.
the bottom line is know your market and recognize the niche that's going to serve you best, and make sure that you're hyper focused and go deep in that area.
Yep. Absolutely. So let's get into some of the reports that we have. I know we pulled up a couple of things on Inman. Let's talk about those. Rick, what do you have first for us in that category?
Let's try. Let's see. Well, there was one article that he recommended. There's another appeal against the settlement. So we got to battle one more round to make sure final is final. But what I read is that it's actually a person that's filed an appeal, and it's very common in real estate that this happens. And so it's just news. I don't know that it's game changing for anybody on the call today.
Well, there is something, and I think maybe it's just for leaders. Mark, is it just on, Manny put something in the chat on the KWRI is hosting a KW open house. So that may be for everyone on updates on the NAR settlement, continuing the conversation. There's no registration for that. So please make sure that you all check your emails. That is a KWRI open house. So this is a one of those informational alerts just to let you all know that that is happening today at 12. So stay in the conversation about
And I
that.
just shared the link for that in the chat if anyone needs it.
Yay.
Thanks, guys. Teamwork, making the dream work.
Work makes the dream work.
So here's another article. 9 out of 10 Americans agree that May was a bad time to buy a home. So
Wow.
why, before we even dig into the data, because you know how clickbait works, but at the same time, there's some truth in that. I mean, what are you guys seeing and feeling? Would you agree with that stat?
I don't know. I mean, for me, I was watching most of May rates go down for 4 consecutive weeks. So that's surprising to me.
Yeah, that's surprising to me as well. And so what's interesting about that is, again, we know that real estate is national and local. So, I think it also just depends on what's happening in your backyard and what's happening on a metro area as well. So possibly, maybe that's what they were seeing across the nation, but I think we saw better numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's national news. You have to be careful. Our market, when we looked at our stats just 3 minutes ago, everything looked pretty steady and consistent. We did see a rise in inventory, but we also saw a rise in most counties for pendings and closed. So there's a correlation that's actually, in my humble opinion, optimistic and positive. And so people are still transacting. But the interesting part of the article, so 9 out of 10, I don't know about 9 out of 10, but I think if you just said, maybe there was some bait in there that said something like, relative to affordability and the cost of living increases, is this a great time to buy a home? So maybe the question was posed in a way that wasn't conducive to that quality of life or reasons you would want to buy a home regardless, and that, they haven't spoken to a quality realtor yet. But interesting, when it comes to respondents saying it's time to sell, 64% said it would be a great time to sell, which is a little surprising because when you sell, unless it's an investment property, you immediately become a buyer unless you're going to move to rent.
Right.
And that is conceivable. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, part of it is also like, it just shows that the market as a whole is different than people's perception of the market as a whole.
I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah, you kind of nailed it. But if 65% say that it's a great time to sell, to me, that's an area to focus energy on. And it'd be interesting if you did your own poll. In fact, this might be a reason to call people. I mean, we're always, the quality of the contact and the frequency of the contact will lead to an outcome with your database. So why not call and go, hey, what are your thoughts on the market currently? I'm taking some, market stats, and I'm curious, would you consider this a good time to sell or a good time to buy, and see what people say? I mean, start a conversation, because it's highly circumstantial, and, you don't know what you don't know. There's a saying that, a question unasked is a question unanswered. And so, hey, you're in the market, you know what's going on. What are your thoughts? Those are good questions and a great conversation tool for calls.
I love it. And we're always looking for something that we can certainly create a conversation around. And what's the saying that we grow into the conversations that we lead as well as the ones that we're initiating and having.
1000%. So, and while people are sleeping, there's always opportunity in the chaos. So keep in mind, your job is to expose opportunity and fill that void with expertise and professionalism. All
This
right.
reminds me of that, what is it, the Warren Buffett quote, that be greedy when everyone else is scared and be scared when everyone else is being greedy.
Mhm.
I feel like when, people are starting to sort of go, oh, maybe it's not as good a time to sell as it used to be. That's when you're going to find that opportunity, but you have to have that contrarian mindset.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I heard this the other day too, that Warren Buffett developed like 80% of his wealth, and he's like, I don't even know, 100 billion or 100 plus is some ridiculous number, was earned after his 60th birthday.
Mm.
And it was like that whole compounding thing, and then buying safe stocks and being smart. And I think that what was smart about what he did is he constantly added and stacked opportunity that had to, it took time to develop and evolve into the wealth that he's got. But I found that fascinating. I also found it invigorating that, okay, so what now what? So what if you're 40, 50, 60? There's still time. I mean,
Absolutely.
there's so much opportunity out there. And the people that win are the ones that take advantage, to Mark's point, when the market's down, off, or not. That uncertainty creates a little bit of leverage in your negotiated path, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Totally agree.
All
There
right, cool.
were a couple of things that I wanted to focus on in terms of interest rates, and how many of us, and Rick, I don't know if you can let me share my screen at some, oh, this was one of the ones that you wanted to talk about. We can't read it, Rick, so you'll have to
All right. All
help
it
us
says
through
is pending home sales lag as national market stats show up. So it's just basically it's saying that inventory is outrunning sales. And what I think our data is showing, again, this says Atlanta, and I'm not sure exactly where they pulled their stats because they don't fully align with what we've got.
Right.
Home sellers dropping prices was roughly 6.4%. I don't think that's an absurd number. They're using, they're slashing asking prices. Historically, that still feels normal, if not low. Like, how many people are misjudging the market? Usually it's more like a third to a half in a normalized market. So I think we're just heading towards a normalized market. And again, you have to be aware that this gets read, by a lot of people. And so if that's the message, you're going to have to counteract with local data. That's why we're here today. That's really what I wanted to say.
Absolutely. 100% would agree.
And
Interest rates right now, I was looking at our interest rates, and right now we're at 7.15% on a 30-year fixed conventional. 15-year is 6.6%. FHA 30-year is 6.64, and 30-year VA is 6.65. But what I thought was interesting is, are we talking about payments? We've talked about interest rates for the last however many years when interest rates were incredibly low. Are we really talking about payments? And so I want to kind of find out what everybody else is seeing and hearing, and I'm going to share my screen if that's okay, just to kind of show some of the things that we're looking at. What's the conversation around payments? Are we having that conversation? Are we back to that? Oh, Kelly and Matt are all on there as well. So what are we talking about? Mark, Rick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the conversation is always, how can you afford this property, right? Make sure that you feel comfortable making your payment every month. So looking at it on a monthly basis and not looking at prices per se, looking at what that does for your payment is always the best way to go. And I don't know, I feel like there's also, like, you have to understand that when there's these types of interest rates go up, it has a proportionate change to it, but it's usually not a whole lot, right? If it's going from 3 to 7%, yeah, that's a big jump. But 6.5 to 6.6 is not a big jump. So understanding that right now, the market's not moving a whole lot within the range it's in. So understanding what that does to your monthly payment, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 or 3 things that you have to focus on in the conversation. And if you fixate on rate, you're going to lose people because it's almost like staring down, you know, at a flashlight. Like at some point, you're just blinded by the light. And the conversation really needs to be affordability, upside potential, and quality of life. If those three things are incorporated into your consulting, you'll probably land in a place that's more inspired and a bigger, deeper thought.
Yeah.
And as always, motivation is going to drive everything. So the life events that people are having are making people buy and sell right now. So get really good with your forward questions and understand what's going on in that person's life that's necessitating a move.
Yes. I thought, and all of those are very, very good facts. I saw this Facebook post on one of our leaders' Facebook page, and it says in 1971, the interest rate was 7.33%. If you had waited for rates to drop, you wouldn't have bought a home until 1993. You would have rented for 22 years while you waited for rates to go down, while house values quadrupled. Don't wait to buy real estate and wait. I thought that was an excellent post because we're talking about, you know, everybody says, I'm going to wait until the rates go back to 3%, 4%. Well, how long did it take us to get there? We won't see that in our lifetime. So just thought that was a great post. What are we using or seeing as MOFers in order to get people to act right now?
Well, before you even go there, the fact that it said, you know, 60 some odd percent felt it was a bad time to buy, they need to understand this data. This is a conversation in itself. And I think it's a brilliant thing to share. And, you know, there's no one that's bought real estate in the past that held it and sold at the right time that didn't think they were a genius, because it's a brilliant wealth building tool.
Totally
And so
agree.
what are some mofos or conversation starters? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, I am. I am. What is the mofo? What are we doing and to make people move? What are we hearing?
I mean, and I've been talking about this a lot, but again, going back to those like life events, understanding all the D's that drive real estate, you know, diapers, divorce, debt, distress, you know, all of the D's are life events. So asking questions around those 10 D's, what are those life events and what is going on in that person's world? And can you identify an opportunity that's coming up? For example, if someone's child is in high school now, then it's a good time to start talking to them about buying a place for them to live in while they're at the university that they go to. Right. So there's an investment opportunity there. Instead of spending 4 years spending money on room and board, why not put that into an investment that's going to grow over the 4 years that the person's there, and, you know, have that conversation now so they can start saving for it.
I love that, Mark. And that leads me to one of the things that we talked about in one of our sales meetings. You know, we're talking about the different types of lending products and how well are we up to date. And this was something that was on the news a couple of weeks ago, maybe last month, and it talked about FHA loan limits. And I did not know that you could actually buy a fourplex under FHA. So we're talking a lot about our children and young adults and how we're getting them the help that they need. And is there a low cost area versus a high cost area? I think this is the time that we really do have to sharpen our skill sets and learn more about products that are available and programs. So this was an interesting fact, because as long as it's your primary residence, are we talking about house hacking? So you just mentioned buying inventory where people go to school. What if you bought a fourplex, and what if your child stayed in there as their primary residence? And what if you know, they were able to rent out the other 3 rooms that would take care of that rent that we just saw over here for $1,600 a month. So these are the creative things that we need to look at, but also to educate ourselves in terms of that, because I'm looking at FHA loan limits in high cost area. You know, it is amazing. Now, of course, we're probably talking about California when we're looking at these, but still $500,000 for a single family home, 40,000 for a duplex, almost $1 million for a fourplex. I just think these are things that we need to be talking about. And what I love about it is that they can still be your primary residence. You can do house hacking. We can be creative with it, and you can still get that income. So any thoughts around that? Or is this new news to you? Or maybe you all knew it?
It's not new news. One thing, by the way, in talking about rate, people get hung up on the actual cost, like they go straight to a calculator and they don't factor in the mortgage interest deduction. Make sure you're talking about net cost to own.
Mhm.
And so house hacking is a real thing, and I think that is something to say, hey, and you're go back to, a lot of kids are living in the basement right now still with their parents, and what if you
Yeah.
help teach them wealth building, and you know, split the profits on a rental property or one that they live in, and house hack, you know, rent 2 or 3 rooms. And that's what I did in my first house. And by the way, my first house was at 8%, and it floated down from 8.25 like a week before, and I thought I'd literally stolen money. I cartwheeled to the closing and out. And so
Right.
it's all perspective. And
Mhm.
that one other thought I had about the 22-year thing, that if you paid one extra mortgage payment a year, I believe the number is that you'll pay off a 30-year mortgage in 23 years. So that person that bought at 7.25 would actually have a clear and free asset, probably worth, I mean, you tell me, 250, 354, you never know based on appreciation. At a minimum, it's worth at least what they paid. And it's an asset it's like saving, for someone to save $300,000 is, it's not common. It's not easy. And so it's another bucket in which to build wealth and stability. So just a couple of other thoughts to add on.
Yeah. And Luke had emailed us some stats, and
Yes.
May 2024 over May 2023, prices were up 3.9%. So almost the 4% annual average, 50-year average. So even though there's fewer homes selling, prices are still going up.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Here's another article. We may have shared this at one of our previous calls, but the 7 reasons great real estate agents will always be needed. I think these are great reminders. You know, we talk about affirmations, so maybe we need to have our daily 7 affirmations just to remind us of why people actually need us. Number 1 was experience. Key local insights. Gosh, that's all we've been talking about today. What's really happening hyper local in our neighborhoods? And then our network of local resources. So this is where I think it's very important for us to talk about those products and programs, but also the reason that we're with KW. So many of my agents, I tell them, you need to be selling the heck out of KW, because at this time, we have such a great network of local resources. So it doesn't matter if you're on the South Side or if you're in Bartow County or Alabama, it really doesn't matter. We are everywhere. So really having those network of local resources to be able to help promote. Valuation of expertise. We're talking a lot about opportunities. And what I am seeing, even in you talked about the D's, the divorce, distress, all of the different things, diapers, valuation of expertise. Even in distressed properties, we are finding that, not like we were several years ago when we were with distressed properties and people were doing short sales, but people truly can get a paycheck. And so I had this happen to a friend of mine, and I just wish she would have moved, sooner. But they were going into foreclosure because of a divorce, and they didn't sell the house, because you never think that it's going to happen. And what we're not in is, we're not in the COVID where they're saying, hey, we're not going to pursue it. But that's an opportunity because they have so much equity. Unfortunately, they lost about 200,000 in equity in their home just by letting it foreclose, because the investor did not pay the top dollar for it. So just listing it with a professional, this is why people need us, in terms of, we never know the life experiences that they're going to, because they may not talk about it. Any
Right.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that just underscores the reason to stay in touch with your database, right? Because they're not going to share if they're in financial distress. They're not going to share those negative things in regular conversation on Facebook and Instagram. It's going to be a one-on-one where you uncover what's going on in their world.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, Rick, were you going to add something?
No, just the first person to have a meaningful conversation at the right time is the person that wins.
Yep, absolutely. Lastly, negotiation skills, marketing skills, and then legal navigation through the process. I think that that is interesting considering the times that we're living in right now, with everything that is going on in our market and with our agents. So it is time to make sure that we are abreast to all of the conversations and making sure that we have everything in line. As we close out, Mark, Rick, first of all, I want to say thank you for joining me, as well as everyone on this call. Thank you so much. And I know we had some chatter early on, so you guys got to be with us live. Anything that you all would close out with, Rick, Mark?
Always back to basics. No matter what market you're in, go back. Are you doing the foundational work of staying in touch with your database on a daily basis? That's it.
And are you using the news that most of our consumers are reading and watching to your advantage by asking better questions? What's the question that you should be asking, and if you're in their shoes, solves a problem or opens another conversation or a possible referral? Because it's not always them. Who do you know that I should know that might benefit from my expertise?
Love it.
Absolutely. Love it, love it, love it. All right, guys. Happy Monday. Have an award-winning day, and thank you for joining the call. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks,
Take care.
Toya. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Mark. Good job.